why we are not supporting Ukraine here is because we are just trying to make sure that we are safe in the neighborhood. And our neighborhood means not only China and Pakistan, but also Russia. And if you go to again back to history, it may not repeat itself, but our last experience with Russia when the chips were down was very good. In 1971, when it became known that we will be severing Bangladesh from Pakistan, the supporter and friend of Pakistan at that time, USA, moved towards our southern shores from the Indian Ocean with its frigate. The idea was to bomb South India, nuke South India. And that is the time when the nuclear submarine also moved. The Russian nuclear submarine also moved towards the frigate. And when America saw this, then it retreated. And Bangladesh happened. We won that war.
While our attendees are joining in, I'll just quickly begin the session. So very happy to see this fraternity join in. Welcome to the Blue Circle. It's such a big privilege and pleasure to connect with everyone and our distinguished keynote speaker who's handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience he brings in. Thank you also to our distinguished audience for joining us, most of whom are CEOs and CXOs and senior leaders. Many of them are our members and are repeat visitors to our webinars. This is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue through the online mode as well. For those of you who are new with us today, Blue Circle is the world's first sector-specific networking app for business leaders that's built in India. Currently focused on 20 sector communities such as e-mobility, energy, aerospace and defense, and many more. We also present socioeconomic insights which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. Along with our weekly webinar series and our digital publication, you will be happy to know that we have recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle app for leaders, somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for senior leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with over 12,000 plus like-minded leaders from India and across the globe, house high-quality curated content, and access business opportunities across these sectors. Those leaders among you who are interested, please do join in. I will share the link to the app in the chat section and will soon be sending out invitations to our new guests post today's discussion. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce today's keynote speaker, Mr. Pavan Choudary. He's a leading thinker on geopolitical competition and statecraft. He's a trustee with Bharatiya Videsh Niti Parishad, has written critically acclaimed books on Chanakya and Machiavelli. His best-selling book, When Your Sinking Become a Submarine, is a classic on competition. He is an angel investor, chairman Blue Circle, and sits on several boards across the country. Thank you for joining us, sir. And for today's topic, Mr. Choudary will be discussing the Russian-Ukraine crisis, the geo-commercial impact and opportunity for India. Now, I request Mr. Choudary to please begin the session, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gautam. And thank you, everybody, for joining. I already got a list of the people who have kind of volunteered to join, and it is really very gratifying that this is the quality of people that are there on this webinar, or let me say, keynote from my side, and also I will try to answer the questions which I have received. So let me begin this talk with a question which I have received from Mr. Anil Behel, who is General Manager Zico India. What is the actual root cause of this conflict, as there are too many theories floating around? I think that's a very good place to begin. So in 1991, the Cold War got over. Russia was in a way vanquished, or USSR was vanquished, and it split into 15 countries. Most of these were small countries. 70% of the land was still with Russia, which was the big dominant player here. In 1996, the Budapest Memorandum was signed between Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, USA, UK, and Russia, where 200 of the nuclear warheads which Ukraine had were handed over to Russia as a part of the non-proliferation treaty. The other side of this deal was that the codes of these warheads were not with Ukraine. They were with Russia only. That means, in a way, the warheads which the Ukraine was surrendering were inactive or defanged. So this is what happened in 1996. Then in 2013, there was a pro-Russian, till 2013, there was a pro-Russian government in Ukraine. In 2013, it was headed by Viktor Yanukovych, and who Russia had persuaded not to quote the EU or NATO, and he had willingly agreed. However, in 2013, the US engineered the Euromaidan coup, and that made Yanukovych escape to Russia and take sanctuary there. The new government which came was pro-US and pro-joining the EU and NATO. And at that time, Ukraine, as you would know, is used for a lot of gas pipelines, gas which goes from Russia to Europe. And Nord Stream was one of those. So Ukraine not only said that we would like to join EU and NATO between that point and 2017, 2019, it also said that we would like Russia to pay $35 billion as transit fee annually to Ukraine. This point was first made in 2014. Transit fee for its gas. Russia was extremely, let me say, disappointed or angry with this kind of an outlook taken by Ukraine, and it annexed the lower part of Ukraine, which is called Crimea. The Western powers, that is the G8. G8 means Britain, France, Germany and Italy from Europe, Japan and Russia from Asia, and Canada and US from the Western Hemisphere. So this was the G8 composition. So 7 of them, which other than Russia, they decided to punish Russia. And the punishment which they gave was from G8, they became G7. They dropped Russia. Of course, they brought in sanctions, etc. also, which hurt Russia, but not in any debilitating manner. So in 2015, an agreement was signed between Ukraine and USSR and the Western powers, which is called the Minsk Agreement, where Ukraine agreed that it will not quote US, European powers and NATO, and it will also limit the influence of these countries in its own country, because Russia's point was that it was getting surrounded by NATO powers. Out of the when in 1991 there were 16 NATO members, now there are 30, and there are breakaway countries from Russia like Latvia, Lithuania, etc., which have become NATO members. So all around Russia was feeling insecure, and it agreed to the Minsk agreement, and things moved then thereafter smoothly for 1 or 2 years. But in 2017, again, Ukraine asked for becoming a member of the NATO, which is when a new government also, about a year and a half after that, a new government was ready to take control. And that government was the Zelensky government, which we have today. So, and Zelensky started becoming very close to the US and EU, and actually started almost getting played by the US. Meanwhile, Putin gave an ultimatum which had three primary demands: no joining of Ukraine into NATO, removal of your troops from my border countries, and removal of the American nukes from mainland Europe, which are pointing towards USSR. All these demands were not met. And meanwhile, Putin and China were closing up, because China was also at the receiving end of hostility from America, both trade and other. In February 1st, I think, Putin and Xi met in Beijing, and Putin announced that Taiwan is a integral part of China, and Xi said that our friendship is limitless. That itself was a very big signal of things to come. On 20th February, the Winter Olympics in Beijing got over. 21st February, Putin, taking advantage of UN Article number 7, announced the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk. This area is also called the Donbass region. Article number 7 of UN says that a country cannot invade another, but can come to the assistance of a public which is being hostilely treated or held against its wishes by any other government. So using this Article number 7, which America has used in many, many countries, whether it is Iraq or Syria or Cuba, etc., Russia announced the independence of these two regions, and through a special military operation, 23rd, the things got sealed. So, of course, China had given a green light. It was evident because Russia pulled away its forces from its eastern border, which borders China, and placed these forces in the west. So this is broadly the actual root cause of this conflict, starting from the end of Cold War till date. Now, how this conflict affects all of us, affects the country in which we live, affects other countries, is actually multifolded. If I was to look at the various sectors of the economy and give you some generic impact and then some specific impact, you will be able to assess the impact as well as the opportunity within. So Russia, as you know, is basically a country whose economy is based on commodities. Commodities means whatever comes from the earth, whether it is grains, oil, minerals, gas. So this is the mainstay of the Russian economy. In the oil and gas sector, if we see, USSR is the second largest exporter of oil in the world, right after Saudi Arabia. And the rising costs of oil will impact all of us through inflation. Specifically, British Petroleum and Shell will be withdrawing from their large joint ventures with the government-controlled oil producers of USSR like Gazprom and Rosneft. Equinor, which is also a very large Norwegian oil company, you will recognize it better when I tell you its earlier name is Statoil. And because there was this suffix oil in it, and the world is moving towards renewables, it has changed its name to Equinor. It is also withdrawing. On the mineral side, one of the very important minerals which Russia has large reserves of is palladium. Palladium is used in the auto sector to defang the carbon monoxide which comes out of the exhaust pipes. The other element which is very commonly found in Russia and whose rates have risen after the sanctions were imposed on Russia after 2014 is aluminium. The US bureaucrats had said that Rusal, which is the largest producer of aluminium in Russia, if we impose sanctions on Russia, nothing much will change because aluminium is a fungible element. That means it can be substituted. But it didn't so happen because the certifications which are required of quality of aluminium, they were not available with ordinary companies, even if they could substitute the aluminium made by Rusal. So specifically, Volvo, Daimler, Renault, all these companies, they've been badly hit by sanctions. They are considering withdrawal and also expecting supply chain breakdowns. Some companies are also adjusting prices of their cars right now because of the decline in rubles to compensate for this decline. Another very important element which controls locomotion by air is titanium. Russia has a large reserve of titanium also, Russia and Ukraine. So there is a very large company called VSMPO, Visma, which is located in the titanium valley of Russia, which is in Western Siberia, controlled by an ex-colleague from KGB of Putin, who has now become a very big oligarch there. And Boeing, Airbus, etc., are dependent up to 50% or 40% of their supply of titanium from Russia. Titanium, as you would know, has a very high ratio of strength to weight. That means weight is less, strength is high, and it is also corrosion resistant. The Russia and Ukraine airspace also has become now a no man's airspace. So flights between Europe and Asia now have to take a detour. The share prices of Singapore and Japan Airlines dropped 6% just last Thursday after the news of the invasion started spreading. Coming to the tech side now. In chips, Russia is not self-sufficient. It makes only lower quality chips. However, Russia has neon, which is a laser gas for chip lithography. 90% of this neon gas comes from Russia and Ukraine. And the world will really be starved of this gas if the things do not normalize soon, unless they discover new ways of finding the gas. In the cyber risk area also, Ukraine is very strong in cyberspace. And we might expect a lot of cyber attacks, and their dwell times can be often 6 months. That means if they have even started already, corporates would not know that the attack is underway till 6 months have passed. They spread silently and perniciously through the systems. So, important area for all of us to watch out. Ukraine is also an important tech outsourcing hub. You must have heard of an app called Grammarly. It's a pretty nice app. This has its origin in Ukraine. You have large forces of SAP and Viber of Japan working in Ukraine. It's quite let me say, digital friendly country. You would notice that they have created a separate website of Russian soldiers who have been captured and how what a plight they are in, and how still they are being treated well by the Ukraine, but how scared they are. And they've kind of made it a digital station for anybody at any time to find the plight of these Russian soldiers, and thereby giving a greater momentum for advocacy against war, and kind of doing some positive propaganda towards itself and negative towards Russia. On the agricultural side, this part, Russia and Ukraine are the largest exporters of wheat and corn, also sunflower oil. The grain terminals are closing, processing units are closing. Even though they supply primarily to Europe, the broader grain prices expect to go up. Of course, there is a lot of opportunity for India also here. As you would know, that India is becoming the new breadbasket for West Asia in UAE, Saudi Arabia, etc. We are now becoming the biggest food exporting country. So that was about the agricultural side. Coming to the consumer goods side, Carlsberg gets 10% of its global revenue from Russia. It has many distilleries there. It seems that the Russians really like not only vodka but also beer. Nestle and Danone, who also have big operations there, have suspended operations. In terms of the entertainment sector, Walt Disney, Warner Brothers are delaying releases. These are quite popular in Russia, though they do not make for a very large audience, but the popularity is high. And in healthcare, as far as vaccines are concerned, Sputnik was not so central to the entire vaccine operation. It is authorized in 71 countries, in India also. But out of the 1.8 billion doses given so far, Sputnik accounts only for 1.2 million in India. The later versions of Sputnik now will have difficulty in getting the authorization from WHO. In terms of medical technology, the company which I spoke of, the Titanium Valley company, VSMPO AVISM, is strong in alloys, and many of the alloys used in medical technology product come from its subsidiary in US. However, there will be substitute producers, and that should not be a big worry. Regarding pharma, India is a very large supplier of medicines to Ukraine, and I hope that in times to come, we will not be hit by the sanctions. The sanctions have a wind down period. So those periods have yet to be fully announced. And till those periods are announced, if you can hold on your exports, it is better, because then you will know what will be the kind of payment terms, etc., and whether they fall within the wind down period, and that the transactions which you are doing are safe. So this is broadly the different sectors and how this war is going to impact them. Now let me come to a couple of questions which you have asked. Another question which has come from Anil Behel, General Manager, Zico India, is how does India extract maximum benefit of the outflux of businesses from Russia and especially China due to the war? So it's interesting here. Danone, Nestle, these are companies which have really not invested as much as India can justify investing. We should surely look at all these companies, whether it is Danone, Nestle, or the automobile giants which are coming out of Russia. It is possible that they might still stay in Europe. But the China plus one strategy, which West is looking for, the West, as you know, is looking for another destination in Asia other than China to manufacture. And from random offshoring, the West and Japan are going for friendshoring. You know what is friendshoring? Friendshoring is doing business with those countries with who you have good relations in the past, similar democratic systems or similar political systems, similar economic systems, long years of peace, ability to execute your intellectual property laws, ability of that country to stand up to any bully in the region to protect your intellectual property laws, And I think India scores very, very well on this, on all these, as far as as it becoming a substitute for a China based manufacturing in Asia is concerned. However, this China plus one is actually not ending with India. India is not becoming the alternative to China. Other countries are also jostling for that space. Vietnam, for example, is one among them. I was just going through an interesting statistic that Samsung India was formed in 1995 and Samsung Vietnam was established in 2009. Samsung India's total revenues are $7.5 billion. And Samsung Vietnam's total revenues are $75 billion, 10 times, though it came 15 years later. And $65.5 billion out of the 75 is coming from exports. So we need to really see what else other than wages, taxes, logistics, infrastructure, size of the market, is it that the companies are requiring to invest in a country. I feel an important area where we need to improve is administrative and behavioral reforms. And our bureaucrats, many of them are extremely enlightened, but the median bureaucrat has to understand that greater social graces are required in interacting with businessmen today, because businessmen have come at the center of the economic and financial life of the world. Earlier, businessmen were not so important. The general was plundering and the bureaucrat was administering and redistributing. However, today, the social impact of the investor, the entrepreneur is very high. And enlightened bureaucrats are already understanding this and realizing that he has to get an equal chair at the table, otherwise he will go to a Vietnam. So this is broadly what I would like to say. If there are any other questions, I'll be happy to take. Otherwise, let me see if I have got, there's one or two more questions here. Questions are also very impressive. So the question is saying, tell us about the Thucydidean trap and Brinkmanship. So, and there are some more questions I see here. Hold on. Okay, great. Very knowledgeable audience. I'll come back to you, Mr. Behel. Let me tell you about the Thucydidean trap and Brinkmanship. So Thucydides was a great war historian who said that when there is a superpower and a new power will emerge, as this new power is rising, there will be a clash, and very often this clash may end in a war unless the bigger power subjugates it. So when Japan rose in 1990, because of the fact that it had no military power and because of perhaps its own hesitations, it did not fully challenge America, and after some time, the Japanese threat was gone. But when China rose, then China is steadily challenging America, though staying away from an all-out war. Trade war, yes, but otherwise staying away from hostilities. So Thucydidean trap is this trap. Brinkmanship is what Putin is doing. Brinkmanship means you take your opponent to the edge of the precipice, the brink, and then you catch hold of him and you say, now I am willing to jump, but I will take you down with me. So that is what Putin is saying, because Putin understands that the Russia which he inherited had the tank, but it did not have the treasure. Japan could not challenge USA because it had the treasure. तिजोरी थी लेकिन तोप नहीं थी. And Russia के पास तोप थी लेकिन तिजोरी नहीं थी. So for many years, Russia's carbines have been full, but coffers have been empty, which is why Russia is going again and again, entering Syria, entering Yemen, everywhere it is going, through Iran. Now Russia has got its moment. Of course, it has also been forced on Russia by surrounding Russia and pushing its back to the wall. So this is what is brinkmanship, which Putin is using right now. Another question here which has come is, why should India support Ukraine when they have always had an anti-India stance at the UN and other forum from Pokhran 2 onwards? Yeah, you're right. But interests change, and history is not the reason why we are not supporting Ukraine. Their opposition did not count for much. We know that Ukraine was supplying tanks to Pakistan, and they had a very strong, strong obligation to support Pakistan. Why we are not supporting Ukraine here is because we are just trying to make sure that we are safe in the neighborhood. And our neighborhood means not only China and Pakistan, but also Russia. And if you go to, again, back to history, it may not repeat itself, but our last experience with Russia when the chips were down was very good. In 1971, when it became known that we will be severing Bangladesh from Pakistan, the supporter and friend of Pakistan at that time, USA, moved towards our southern shores from the Indian Ocean with its frigate. The idea was to bomb South India, nuke South India. And that is the time when the nuclear submarine also moved. The Russian nuclear submarine also moved towards the frigate. And when America saw this, then it retreated. And Bangladesh happened. We won that war. However, there was a cost also to be paid for that war, that America, rather than going with any other country, decided to partner with China in its trade. Kissinger and Nixon, etc., they decided that we will make China our partner. And after that, China grew like anything till it became their biggest challenger. The other question which has come here is, how soon can we decouple our defense requirements from Russia? So in my view, this is not a very linear game. because we are tied up in various areas, not only the artillery side, but also the Air Force side, as well as the tank side. So, a submarine side, naval side, shipbuilding side. So, this decoupling with Russia uh, cannot anytime happen very soon. And I think rather than looking at as decoupling, if we will look at making use of the offset clauses and making Atmanirbhar, making ourselves self-sufficient in defense is what we should look at. And we are moving towards that also with the help of Russia. And Russians are, as I've heard, relatively unhesitatingly sharing their technologies. BrahMos, jointly developed by us, is a case in point, which is also getting exported now. So regarding the Arctic oil reserves, these are very important, however, very difficult to mine. And Russia is trying its best to stake its claim on its share there. So great then. It was pleasure being with you all. I really appreciate that almost all of you have stayed for the whole time, and what fine questions you've come out with. And your questions reflect your scholarship. And I'm very, very happy to have interacted with an enlightened audience like yours. Gautam.
Thank you very much, sir. Such an insightful and engaging session, and a privilege to hear you. Guess and I have been hooked till the very end, and I've taken up several nuggets. And thank you to our leaders in the audience for joining us and for staying till the end and always asking excellent questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Have a good day.